Hello everyone, it is Halloween 2020 and as promised I am doing my Ask Me Anything. Your questions were on Twitter earlier. I am going to read through them now and answer your Ask Me Anything. And if you're wondering, yes, I am going to be dressed like this for the Queensland election later on tonight. That will be on Wilm's Front and the links are in my Twitter. You can join us there at 8 o'clock. So on to the Ask Me Anything. Now, first question is from, well, first of all, Darren said vampire costume. No, vampires don't dress as vampires on Halloween because that's our normal state of being. So instead, I've gone as a cat. I thought about Daniel Andrews, but I can't afford North Face. So, first question is from Sean Ford. I'd be interested in you rating the prime ministers you remember in order from best to worst, explaining why you rank them where you do. So I haven't seen that many prime ministers. The first one I remember is Paul Keating, whom I set at the bottom of a very deep pit. He was the one who wiped out the middle class and working class when I was growing up, and none of us will ever forgive him for what he did to us and all of our friends and all of the kids that I grew up with. We all lost our homes and our businesses, and our parents had to take on 2 jobs to keep us at school. So he will forever be hated. So he's at the bottom. Then we had John Howard, and we all remember him as being a time of economic prosperity and stability. And that's when we all had our... So the 90s were very much a period of fun and joy and hope. So how much that had to do with John Howard, he presided over that period of time. So I will put him at the top. As for the Rudd, Gillard mess, and then Turnbull, and even Scott Morrison to an extent, I grouped them all into this gelatinous mass of, just failure, and they're just not the leaders that we grew up wanting to have. So I hope that we have better leaders in the future, but basically John Howard, Paul Keating, and then a band of everybody else in the middle. Next question is from Hamish. How many times have people threatened to sue you? So not as many as you would think, and they are mostly from a very small group of blue tick lefties who are prominent on Twitter. The first one was who threatened to sue me a couple of times when I said mean things about his wind turbines. And then I had a few threats of being sued by anonymous accounts whom I'm reasonably certain are related to these wonderful moral arbiters that we have. All of them were in regards to solar and wind technologies, and none of them liked you saying things like they break down, they're pointless, they end up in landfill. So that's the best way to get sued online. So that's the answer to your question, Hamish. Not that many, maybe 2 or 3 times, and I'm pretty sure it was the same person. Kate asks, what positive attributes do you gain from engaging on Twitter? Well, first of all, Twitter is the open forum. So at the very least, what you gain from Twitter is an understanding of the conversations happening around people's dinner tables. Now, plenty of people say that Twitter is not real life, and I'm here to tell you it is real life. And in many respects, it is more real than what you will see people say in public, because under the veil of anonymity, they tend to tell you their real feelings. So you should listen carefully to what you hear online. Now, of course, there are trolling accounts and bots and things like that, but there's also the vast majority are real people, particularly our young people, and what they say is often quite scary. In addition to knowledge, what you get out of Twitter is the ability to interact with people, and every now and then you get to have a conversation with somebody who is very set in their ways. And when you challenge their point of view, sometimes you learn something new yourself, and sometimes, occasionally, you manage to change their mind. So the only way that we are going to make any progress with the youth of today is if we talk to them. And Twitter is a mechanism which we can actually reach out to the youth and have a conversation and ask them why they feel the way they do, and continue to expose them to points of view that their lecturers and their little safe spaces don't give to them. And eventually the tide of information will turn. I know some people don't believe that, but I do have faith that that will eventually change. So I think overall, oh, and the other thing, it's used for completely unusual purposes. So when there's a natural emergency, Twitter becomes a mechanism by which people uh, communicate and find each other. So it's like a giant radio slash billboard of information where facts and truth are unable to be repressed no matter how much our social media oligarchs would like them to, because there's just too much information coming too fast. So at the very least, Twitter gets the truth out eventually, and it does perform a vital part of society, balancing off the major media corporations where the media and our ABC cannot tell a truth of their own making, while ever the internet is there to contradict them. So we should value Twitter, even though it has attributes we don't like, and work to improve it, rather than desiring that we remove it just to spite Jack. So I hope that answers your question, Kate. Next question. Tony Byron asks, I'm watching The Shining for the second time this week, a spooky classic. Well, that is a great film, Tony. I just finished watching The Thing again from the 70s with Kurt Russell and his enormous beard. That was also a great horror film, probably one of my favorites. And the new remake of Fright Night is also really good if you're looking for a Halloween special. Stephen Young asks, do you think humans will develop FTL, which is faster than light propulsion systems, enabling us to visit other star systems in the next 100 years? Or perhaps AI will develop FTL technology once humans reach technological singularity around 2030, 2035. So, I'm a sci-fi nerd, so I will try and keep this brief, or it will go on for the entire Q&A. I think that the speed of light is one of those fundamental physics rules that we actually can't break. So there are some things that sci-fi loves to play with because we want to be able to break them, but are actually fundamentals that we can't. So we can't travel faster than light, as far as we know. And I don't think we will actually ever travel faster than light. The best we can hope to do is travel outside the normal space-time continuum, and that's what they usually mean by faster than light propulsion systems. That is, going through some kind of wormhole or bending space in order to get around the FTL problem. I don't think we are anywhere near that kind of technology. So I don't think 2030 or 2050 is remotely possible if we don't get into some kind of massive global conflict and set ourselves back a few hundred years. I think that intergalactic space travel, that is not just to our nearest planets but to other solar systems, will be done the old-fashioned way first, and I think it will be done with AI before we send out any people, and that will probably be launched maybe with my lifetime, maybe toward the end of my lifetime. We'll be sending ships out. It's very expensive. We won't hear back from those ships for hundreds of years, so it's a long-term project. I think Mars is far more likely. I think we'll get that in the next 10 to 15 years, and I think there'll be humans on Mars in that period of time, because they already put the launching requests out for volunteers. So not FTL. I think interplanetary travel will be far more likely in 2030, 2050. So I'll stop now, or I'll go on forever. It's just, don't tempt me with sci-fi. Guns in Australia asks, can Marxism work? Surely it just needs some fine-tuning, maybe, with a smiley face. I presume that's a rhetorical question, to which the answer is no. The 1% asks, what are you wearing? I'm wearing this. And it will be on the internet forever. Stephen Gent asks, cashless society, NWO, which is New World Order, etc., is it real, or are they still working on it? Well, we know it's real to the extent that they put it into the UN documents. We know it's real because all the people in charge of our lives keep talking about it. And whether or not Scott Morrison knows what he's doing or is just following UN mandates, he has managed to bring in the first step to a cashless society, which is limiting our cash transactions under the banner of, oh, it'll help with crime. But of course, crime always finds a way around. All it has done is penalize normal people and to invalidate what is a valid form of tender, and I don't think that is in the spirit of our constitution or indeed our English law, which we inherited from our parent nation. So, Scott Morrison, if you aren't paying attention, you really should stop playing into the UN's New World Order and Clash of Society. We don't want it. It's very dangerous for the sovereignty of our nation, and you should be a bit more cluey when it comes to that sort of thing. And no, it's not a conspiracy. It's in print. Dave asks, didn't Halloween have its roots in Latin American culture called the Day of the Dead? No, Halloween has been around for a lot longer than that. It's essentially a Celtic tradition that has been passed through various nations over time and adapted. And a lot of people know it from the American traditions, but it did actually begin in England a very long time ago. And as a sort of pagan, in the term of I'm a farmer, so we play into the pagan idea, even though we're not religious at all. We always like to have a bit of fun on Halloween. And that's all it is. I like to dress up, and if anyone brings me candy, then by all means, there's a bucket at the door. So no, it didn't. It was a English tradition. And someone actually helped them reply in the comments, so that's nice. Eric says, since Halloween is my birthday, I should get 2 questions. Well, first of all, happy birthday, Eric. And yes, you can have 2 questions. What's your fondest Halloween memory? Well, we always used to dress up on Halloween as adults more than as children. As children, we didn't really do it that much, but as adults, we all got together and decided that we're going to have some fun. And we would dress up, have a party at my place, and we would watch movies. We'd have like a Halloween movie night. So, and we'd make tea cocktails because I love tea and my friends like to drink. So we do tea cocktails. So that's my fondest Halloween memories. And 2, what is the airspeed velocity of an unladen sparrow? Stop asking me this question. It's a trolling question. Well done, Eric. William, what's the most left-wing idea that you agree with? Well, freedom of speech is often written off to the left, even though it has throughout history been very much a conservative right-wing concept through English liberty. And that's because the ideas of what is right-wing and what is left-wing has been confused and written up incorrectly in modern history. So if we're going to talk about published left-wing ideas, it would be the French version of having freedom of speech, which is also a conservative view in English liberty. And today, obviously, the left are the censors of the modern world, so it doesn't really apply in today's left-wing world. If you want to know what I agree with in today's left, not much. Gotta say, not much. Most of it's just a rehash of the old social order of identity politics and destructive Marxism, racism, and bigotry. So no, the left hasn't got much to offer today. I'm going to go with freedom of speech. And that's the closest to praise in the French that I will get. Oh no, this question was deleted, so I can't answer that one. Dark Fox PhD asks, can you do a special on the pyramids in Antarctica? Look, I love a good conspiracy theory. Because I'm a writer, I often put that Ancient Aliens show on just to steal ideas for my science fiction writing. The pyramids in Antarctica are, of course, those mountain ranges that happen to look roughly like pyramids. So I would rather do a special on the Russian bases in Antarctica, which they were digging during the wars. And when they were digging down the Russian bases, they actually ran into the huge underground lake systems in Antarctica. Now that is a really fascinating story, and we're not quite sure what has been buried down there during those conflicts because no one wanted to talk about it. And they were finding scientific discoveries at the same time as they were trying to kill each other. So that was a fascinating ticket in Antarctica's history. And I've actually been to Antarctica, so you're right, Dark Fox. I should probably do a little special on that. Australian Ben asks, tell me 3 things women are naturally better at than men. Then tell me 3 things men are naturally better at than women. So, women are better at cleaning up the messes that men make. that happen to us continuously in the office. Women tend to be better at administration work, that is, going through the detail and working out what the heck happened to the accounts. I found that women are better at that naturally. And women are better at just solving problems that are outside the normal sphere of the day. So if I've got a random problem I have to solve, I am far more likely to go and ask one of my fellow office women than I am one of the men, because they tend to be very set in their ways, whereas women will basically go and find any way to solve that problem. And I think that has something to do with having to raise children and how just all manner of chaos happens around them, and they're totally calm. Oh, that's the thing. Women are calmer. They're not as fazed by problems as men. Men are better at doing things around the house, like changing light globes and protecting generally. I will always prefer to have a man protecting me than a woman. They're just bigger and stronger. It's just better. And they're also really good at dealing with difficult legal and tax and just the boring stuff that, yes, we can do it, but I'd just rather make a man do it. Is that abusive? That's probably an abusive relationship. But yeah, I'd rather men have to do the boring stuff that I don't want to do. Can do, don't want to do. Okay. Trent Herbert asks, top 5 music artists you've discovered in the last 2 years. That is a most unfair question because I've been out of the loop in music for a couple of years, which is a sign of my age, I guess. So I'm going to do like recent artists that I've discovered, which is probably 5 years if I'm being perfectly honest. So I'm going to say Imagine Dragons, absolutely love them. Black Keys, I wish I could go to one of their concerts. One Republic and Chaos, which is now known as Smush, and the Chainsmokers. They're going to be my top 5 for right now. Great question. I love music. Alfred E. Newman asks, Vampirus. Well, no, because I'm a vampirus every single day of the week, so today I'm a cat. But also, Alfred asks, okay, if you could go back in time, which time period would you like to experience? For a short time, not live in it permanently. I'd like to say the 1800s because I really want to wear those beautiful corseted dresses. But intellectually, I would like to go back to ancient Rome at its height and see what that kind of civilization really looked like. Or Babylon. I'm torn between Babylon and ancient Rome purely because I like the old buildings. But I'd probably, if I really had to do it, I'd probably pick the 1800s. Kevin Boyd asks, what's your best-selling booze brand? So I don't sell booze. My brother runs a distillery, but our bestseller would probably be the gin, only because we make more of it. We sell out everything as we make it. We also do pink gin, limoncello, and our rum came out yesterday, I think. So we're also doing a whole new special thing called Tiny Batches, where we're doing things like mandarincello and blood oranges. So we're doing a whole new stack of ranges, which should be fun. Christo asks, do you think we have any real chance of economic recovery after the government, mainly the states, overreaction to COVID causing the almost total destruction of our economy? Nations in the West pretty much recover one way or another because humans refuse to continue living in poverty. We have the basic rules of our economic game in capitalism means that as soon as we start creating things, we will tend towards acquiring wealth, so long as our government pulls back on its ridiculous amounts of regulation red tape. So if we want entrepreneurs and businesses to pull together and start to rebuild the wealth of the country, then Scott Morrison is going to have to do what Trump did, which is go through all of this legislation, all the way from council to the nation, and get rid of everything that is there to charge people for being industrious, taxing the life out of them, or just simply complicating things to the point that people can't set up businesses. So if he does that, we will recover, but it's going to take a good 10 to 15 years at the least just to get back to a state of normality. The amount of damage that has been done to this economy has not yet been realized by our politicians. We have lost supply lines. Even in things so much as, like, I'm in retail, the production factories in China have changed their terms from COVID, where they now won't pack a container full of mixed product, they'll only pack full product, which we can't sell because we don't have the market for, which means that stock levels in Australia are now starting to plummet because only the US can buy full container loads. And that is a subversive way that China is starting to punish other nations for them talking about their role in the creation of the COVID virus. And in addition to that, international tourism holds up between 60 to 70% of our bar, club, and restaurant industry. So while ever our international borders remain closed, it doesn't matter what kind of restrictions are lifted on local people, the businesses themselves have a business model built around international tourism. And without that tourism, they are all going to be operating below margin, which will see them collapse in the coming months. Any that have survived, many have collapsed already. And so in order for this train wreck to stop, first of all, it's going to have to continue to crash for a while. And then after it's crashed and everything goes back to normal, it will take it 10 to 15 years just to restart itself. Now, depending on how stupid our politicians are and how greedy they are to regain the money they spent propping people up, will depend on how successful this return to normalcy is. If they start taxing people straight away to recover their budgets, then the country is going to be plunged into debt for 30 to 40 years. So if you're in government, please tell them you have to let companies grow and amass wealth and people recover their own personal wealth before you tax the living shit out of them. Okay? Just a basic economic principle there. I hope that answered your question, Christo. Oh, and of course, that's providing that we don't get invaded by someone like China, which will completely flip the economic board on its head. Roden asks, in brief, what are your hopes and aspirations for yourself, our country, and the planet? I actually think my aspirations are the same for all three of those things right now, which is to survive and be prosperous. And it manifests differently for myself, the country, and the planet. But my hopes and aspirations are that we can move past this period of darkness, economically speaking, and culturally and morally, and back toward the feelings that we had at the turn of the century and the turn of the millennium, when everyone was more positive and happy and freer than we are now. That insidious press of social politics has destroyed the future that we were hoping that we would have. And so I hope that we can go back to that feeling that we had standing underneath the Harbour Bridge at the 2000 fireworks, and everyone thought that the world was going to be a better place. If we can return to that moment, I think we'll be okay. David Raymond asks, could you please write a Constitution and Declaration of Independence for the first available planet or moon, large rock we managed to colonize? Well, we may have to write one for the moon and Mars sometime soon, because at the moment, technically, they actually come under international waters, and so it's basically pirate code at the moment. And that is the legal framework that we operate on in space. It's international waters. So we probably have to update that at some point and go, okay, we definitely have to think about space law. So I might do a fictional one in the novel I'm writing right now. That is set in space. Tim Humphreys asks, what's your favorite Halloween Simpsons episode? My God, it's been so long since I watched Halloween. I think I was actually a kid the last time I watched it. But I do remember one where Mr. Burns sort of became possessed by an alien and Mulder and Scully were there. I think that's my favorite one. I have no idea what it's called, but I do remember that one. And I do like a little bit of X-Files, so I'm going to go with that. Who Am I asks, which do you prefer? Tequila slammers or margaritas? Okay, as a rule, I try not to drink tequila. It makes me very sick. So I'm going to say margaritas, but if I'm going to mainline anything, I'm probably going to go for vodka or limoncello, because it's just better for me at the end of the night. That said, I did have somebody once buy me very expensive tequila slammers, and those were okay. They were pretty good, but I think most tequila's cheap and nasty. Who is Lying 2020 asks, how do I convert a leftist in 3 sentences? Well, I can do it in 1. give me your iPhone. I guarantee you that none of these kids are actually prepared to give up the trappings of their Western society. They don't want to practice what they preach, not when it comes to something that they actually value and cherish. So ask them for their iPhone and then explain to them that's what they are demanding of civilization. That's your best bet. Furry Swan 69 asks, I don't know how to behave, so I'll refrain. Okay. Really Quirky asks, you do know that Halloween is a celebration of the autumn equinox, right? Aren't you in the southern hemisphere? Isn't it spring there? Shouldn't you be dressing up as a bunny? I don't care about your arbitrary rules. At Halloween I will dress as a cat, and at Easter I will dress as a bunny. Look, all of our festivals are the wrong way around in Australia. Our Christmas is spent with Santa Claus on a tractor, dying of heat wearing sunglasses. So we get to go to the beach while you guys are covered in snow. It's just, we do things in the wrong order and we don't care. We're Australians, leave us alone. That's a good question. Noel Eitel asks, curious, do you believe any of the conspiracy theories like deliberate destruction of economy in New World Order or any of the other many things COVID made in test tube G5 USA election? So there's a big difference between a conspiracy theory like there's an alien spaceship sitting in Antarctica underneath the Russian base and things like the New World Order, which are in print in various institutions, and they just sound like things that you would not expect your leaders to do, but that they have actually done. So I think we have to be really careful because today there seems to be this desire to call everything a conspiracy theory in order to invalidate it and stop people asking questions about it. So for example, Hunter Biden's laptop is being discussed as a conspiracy theory. It's clearly not a conspiracy theory. It is something that Biden and his campaign don't want you to talk about it, so they try and deride those who discuss it as, oh, it's a conspiracy theory. It's not. The New World Order is not a conspiracy theory. It is something that has been discussed at length, put into various publications, costed, and put through a whole number of institutions that you'd be worried about. And so that is what we call an inconvenient and disturbing ideology and plan that is real, not conspiracy. As for COVID in a lab, well, we're pretty certain that the Chinese CCP were playing around with coronaviruses in a lab in Wuhan, and that it got out one way or another. How that got out can be the subject of conspiracy theory, but we are within a confidence range of 99% sure that it is the product of a lab. So again, that's not a conspiracy theory. That's just China and the WHO not wanting to take blame on basically a global pandemic that is their fault. Every other time that a pandemic is released, that country has to take some form of responsibility. The same thing happened when foot and mouth got out in the UK. They had to launch a full investigation. They worked out what happened and where it came from, and it was normal. That China, for the first time, has decided that despite it being a global pandemic, they're not going to let anybody have a look at what happened. Now that is why conspiracy theories start, because information is denied under highly suspicious circumstances. I'm not sure if... So do I believe conspiracy theories? Well, my contest to that point will be they're not conspiracy theories. On the flip side, for more outrageous ones, I would like to believe in some fun conspiracy theories, but that's just my sci-fi author part coming out in me. I don't generally believe in conspiracy theories. Johnny Paget asks, in a French maid's outfit, no such luck for you. Also, it wouldn't look any good. Alan P asks a little, hey Alan, there you go, hey. Alex Thomas asks, go as Melinda Gates, or is that over the top? Mum, why is she coming at me with a syringe? Martin asks, did you ever go to Peppermint Park? I love that place. Water slides and video games. Timbertown was fun too. Oh my god, growing up in my holidays in Port Macquarie when I was little, I absolutely went to Peppermint Park and Fantasy Glades and Timbertown, and I loved Peppermint Park. I still can do the theme song, except that I can't sing, so I won't. But that and the camel rides, and yeah, I did, and I miss it, and that's part of that 90s fun that I just wish that we had back. So, oh look, somebody even said Fantasy Glades. Yes, I think we all shared that experience as kids. Alan Masson asks, Were you Marie Antoinette in a previous life? Well, I do like making cakes, but I'm terrible at French. So I learned it for 10 years and I can still barely introduce myself. So no, I don't think I was Marie Antoinette. I did have someone in the French royal court, though, who escaped before the whole started. Phil Ferguson asks, you are very trusting of Twitter. I'm not trusting of Twitter. I am hopeful about humanity. Real Tailgunner asks, who will win the US election? Well, I'm going to go out on a limb and say Donald Trump, because I find it very difficult to believe that the American people are going to elect the comrades of Antifa and the Marxist Black Lives Matter movement, who are racist and violent and divisive, into the White House, under the banner of somebody who struggles to find a microphone half the time, that they are that hopeless. So yes, I'm going to say Donald Trump. Go Trump. Rebooted asks, do you think the time evolution of transient plasma states from nanowire rays irradiated at relativistic intensities is significant? Not sure, have to go have a look. Ryan Pyro asks, any chance of an explanation of how politicians have made changes as to having more power to manipulate laws, reducing their accountability, transparency, by removing safeguards like the role of Governor General and the governors in the state during the 75 Whitlam debacle? Okay, so there's two big questions there. The first is to do with the role of the governors in the constitutional monarchy as far as reserve powers go. And yes, it is true that every time people are asked in a referendum, would you like to give politicians more power and reduce reserve powers, the answer is a resounding no, absolutely not. You cannot have more power. And then afterwards, the politicians go back to the courts and they quietly pass these mandates and legislation that reduces the power of our reserve powers and the role of the governors in each state. Now, the Governor General particularly still has most of his powers. States like Victoria have reduced the role of the governor significantly, but states like New South Wales still have power with their governor. That is a terrible travesty against the Australian people, because when politicians collude or refuse to act in a state of authoritarian, like we are seeing in Victoria, the governor is supposed to be the role of protecting the people from politicians. And so when you reduce the reserve powers of the governor, what you do is empower politicians to act against their own people. Like Daniel Andrews, who is making decisions on his own without reference to what the people actually want. And there is almost no way to get rid of him unless his party decide to get rid of him, and the Labor Party aren't going to do that unless it seems evident that their future electability is in question. And they won't worry about that until closer to an election date. So they have broken down the system of protection via reducing the power of the governor. Now, that is also made worse by the fact that the governor in Victoria is a leftist activist judge who is very unlikely to act against Daniel Andrews in the first place. And so we have to be more careful about how and who we elect as our governors, because all the other stuff they do is ceremonial. At their essence, they are paid a fortune to protect the people. And I have not seen any of the governors lately in Victoria doing their job on that behalf. We should have even heard the Governor General for the nation at least raise some questions about the interference of politician mandates in the life of the Australian people, because it is coming into conflict with the Constitution, and yet we have not heard so much as a squeak out of the Governor General. Okay, so the second part of that question is to do with the expansion of law into the private lives of citizens. And that has been a question asked not just by Australia, but particularly by the UK, and by a fabulous Supreme Court Justice, Jonathan Sumption, who talks about how 100 years ago, law used to be primarily concerned with contracts and civil disobedience, and now it is being used to answer every cultural and social question that we have. And that means that law has permeated every place of our lives. Now, politicians capitalize on this during things like COVID-19, where they have used the law to mandates, which are things that haven't gone through Parliament, in order to write huge amounts of criminal offences and additional infractions, which they never have done in the past. Like it has never happened before in English-speaking countries where the healthy people have had their rights restricted due to a virus or an outbreak. That's never happened before. And the sorts of laws they are changing infringe upon basic liberties that are law, and they are doing it without scrutiny. And they are also acting ahead of the laws they are passing in general. So both Boris Johnson and Jacinda Ardern, and probably Daniel Andrews, but at least those other two, they acted ahead of the law in regards to locking people up, preventing them from travelling, and they had to apologise for acting beyond their brief. Police officers as well, particularly in the UK, have been exercising powers of a police state without authority. And their excuse is, well, in a crisis, we should be able to do whatever you want. And no, the whole point of being a free society and a democracy is that you can't just do whatever you want. You can't use people's health as an excuse to destroy society. And I will point out right here that the government has never cared what happens to your health. When was the last time the government said, oh, we've got to stop everyone from getting cancer? Oh, we've got to stop everyone from getting the flu. Oh, we really care about that, injecting yourself with heroin at our government legalized injecting rooms. No, that's not going to kill you. So basically, the government has only been expanding its law through movements and events that allow it to expand power. So we had climate change, Black Lives Matter, and COVID. They are all activities that have allowed the government to grow their sphere of influence. And the only way it's going to stop is if people stop voting for people who engage in that kind of behaviour. So Queensland, tonight, don't keep voting for a Labor government. They will continue to infringe upon your lives. It's a good question. It takes me far longer to answer that question than I have here today. Cell63 asks, pineapple on pizza? Yes, absolutely. 100%. I don't care what you think. Yes. Heyman asks, wait, you're not already dressed for Halloween? Yeah, I know. Vampires kind of come Halloween preset, but I thought I'd go with the cat thing today. H. Freeman asks, just walk like Nadler to really scare everyone away. I'll keep that in mind. Mechanical Grip asks, if you had to choose between who to be from Buffy the Vampire Slayer universe, would it be Darla or Drusilla? Please bear in mind that this is earth-shattering stuff. Well, I think I'll be Drusilla because I really like to make out with Spike. He's so hot. But then, then Giles was far hotter than all of them. I don't know. I think my answer will be motivated by how to get closer to Giles. Just ignore this question if you don't know anything about Buffy. Baby Yoda said, tell us a little about your IT work. Also, can you sing? No, I can't sing. Just no. IT work. I design AI software databases, mostly for the retail industry, which means that I make computer programs mimic human behavior, as well as just the general web store stuff and point of sale and order to shipping end and that sort of stuff, the boring stuff. I was also tech support for many, many years, which is why I hate Macs and I will not touch a Mac. I spent so much of my life nursing Apple devices in the Apple store that at the end of the day, I was actually helping solve other people's problems who were in line before they got to the Genius Bar, because I'd seen pretty much everything that could go wrong with a Mac by that point in time. Don't get me started. And I used to have people ring me up and be like, oh, my printer stopped working. And you get there and the printer would be stuck together with duct tape. And you're like, gee, I wonder if the printer stopped working soon after you dropped it to the ground and shattered it into a billion pieces. Don't ask tech support people about what they do. It's just the things I have seen. LSACB asks, when is the Bethany versus Ellie MMA event going to take place? That's that crazy Bethany girl who thinks she's going to run a political party, but Daisy and I have taken some very, very valuable screenshots of some of the ludicrous rubbish that she has tweeted in the past, which will look fabulous up on billboards come election time. So that's when you will see the retribution take place on a billboard. Spitty the alpaca asks, what the F is wrong with Vic Rolson's brain? Just remember, Spitty, she is an identical twin. There are two of her. Snowman here asks, when you dress up, remember who you have been speaking to. People like people who give thought to their costume. Well, I came as a cat, which I know it's not the most creative thing, but I always wanted to dress up as a cat properly. And the opportunity never arose, so here I am. Cleocatra asks, hey, well-timed name, asks, do they have Dan Andrews costumes? Yes, it's called North Face, but it's going to cost you an arm, a leg, and half a kidney. Mitch Nicholas asks, are you of the opinion that COVID is a scam so they can push for a cashless society and the Great Reset? No, I don't think that that was what they are after. I think China was playing around with coronaviruses in their Wuhan lab, which they do and have been doing for a while. And I have no doubt that it was meant to be a bioweapon at some stage, but I'm pretty sure it got out early and they initiated one of their contingency plans, which was, oh well, we've released it into the world, let's make the most of it and impoverish the West while we're at it. And that, the cashless society, that's more the UN, that's part of a greater scheme. You know, there's a lot of things in the world that are genuinely the result of stupid behavior. And I think COVID is one of those examples of people who were doing the wrong thing to start with and playing with things they should not have been playing with. And then some idiot let it out. And then a government like the CCP thought, hang on a second, we can make the most of this. I think that's what really happened. Darren asks, do you have a real ghost story you have experienced? So I don't believe in the supernatural or ghosts, but I can say that in the river outside my house right now, 2 brothers were taken by bull sharks. So I had a friend who came here and could have sworn that they heard weird stuff in the fog, because you don't need ghost stories where I live. In wintertime, when you're driving down the road, this heavy fog sort of sits down right in the middle of your windscreen, and we had it once when it was after a big bushfire, so all the trees were blackened and sort of sticking up out of this fog, and it looked creepy as all heck. And we were playing Portishead really loudly coming home at 2 o'clock in the morning. And anyone who knows Portishead knows that would have been a very cool Halloween experience. So no ghost stories, but I do live in a creepy part of the world. Sean Ford asks, tax reform. What would you do, if anything? Do we have too many levels of government? If so, do the states or councils go? Just to answer the second one first, before the first one. Our government structure is correct. The way they are behaving is wrong. So council, state, and federal level is the correct way to divide government. The problem is that the councils are starting to play in politics, which is not their purview. So we need to tighten up what each level of government can be responsible for, and councils need to go back to being managers of their immediate area as far as making sure the streets are okay, garbage collection, organising local events, that sort of thing. Councils have to be returned to that. States should be only concerned with their state matters, and the government should return to its job as the overseer. As far as tax reform, yeah, we got to reform our tax. Our government takes far too much from the people, and what they do take, they then waste. So our government is squandering a fortune, and it would be far better if we left that money in the hands of the Australian people, particularly in this time of crisis. So the first thing that needs to go is payroll tax. Now, that was meant to go anyway when the GST was lifted. As for the GST, it has to stay where it is. I know people are like, oh, let's raise the GST so we can recover some of this money. No, raising the GST adversely affects the goods and services and the businesses who deal in them. So that is retail and hospitality, and the small business owners are the most affected by raising the GST. And all you will do is skim and take more profits and more competition out of the people who we most need to rebuild society. Also, it's already high enough as it is. So just basically, yeah, we have to cut tax by a huge amount if we have any hope of recovering this economy. And if you say, oh, we'll be broke, well, there are billions and billions and billions of dollars that we give away to other nations and other international organizations, which we just shouldn't do anymore. If we're going to tighten our belt, it shouldn't come from raising taxes on our people. It should come from cutting off all these virtue signaling projects that are going on across the world. And not to mention the billions that are given to businessmen in the renewables industry. That industry should have to stand on its own 2 feet. It's just a money pit. Carl Cord asks, got Dictator Dan masks? Absolutely not. I am in the Free State of New South Wales and I definitely do not have a Dictator Dan mask. Kate asks, do you think China will take advantage of the many forthcoming fire sales in our ALP run states? Absolutely they will. And if we're going to pass any laws, it should be to prevent China from profiting off crime, which was their release of COVID-19. And if we don't stop China from buying up all of our property cheap, Australians are going to become squatters in their own nation. It is better off for Australia for our housing prices to be allowed to drop, for people who have never been on the housing market before to purchase property, and for those assets to then be allowed to gradually gain value again, then for the China to come in and buy property at top dollar for a few people, whilst robbing generations of Australians from the ability to own housing. We can't have a situation where our assets are owned by majority foreign interests. It is not good in the long term. It might look good on paper for a single budget. It's terrible for the Australian people and can't be allowed to happen. El Nino asks, your thoughts on the 90-year suppression order by John Howard? I don't know a huge amount about it, but I do think that it sounds wrong and that we should not be protecting pedophiles from exposure. And I don't know why it was done. I would like to see more information on it, but no one's really talking about it in the press, so I think we should talk more about why that happened. And indeed ask John Howard himself why he decided to do that. Last question by Chaga Fryer. I apologize if I said that wrong. Do you think there is a correlation between women's empowerment and declining Western birth rate? And if so, what do you think we do to get the birth rate back above replacement level? So it's actually not women's empowerment that did that. It was the rising cost of living. So in the West, it's expensive to have children. Very expensive. So if we want people to have more children, we have to lower the cost of living or increase prosperity. And right now, it's going to be even worse because everyone is broke because our assets have been wiped out by the overreaction to COVID. So yeah, if you want women to have more children, you have to make it financially more viable for them to have kids. And that includes schooling costs, the cost of childcare, ability to get back into work, flexible working arrangements. But mainly it is to do with the cost of kids. And that means being able to afford a property near a school that you want to send your kids to. I mean, right now, if you had 3 or 4 kids, who can afford a house large enough to put them in near a school they want to go to? And that is the real problem of how to deal with rising birth rates in the West. It's really just a financial question. And there's a lot the governments could do about that. But I don't think they seem to be more keen on importing people rather than helping Australian women to afford having more kids. And that is the last question I have for my Halloween Ask Me Anything 2020. I do this kind of thing on a semi-regular basis, so look out for the next one. You can drop me a question and I will do my best to answer it. In the meantime, you can follow me on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. I also write for various publications, The Spectator, The Penthouse, The Good Source, and I'm on a few podcasts like The Other Side with Damien Curry. In the meantime, if you like what you watch and what you read, consider dropping me a coffee over at Ko-fi. Links are in my bio at the top of this Twitter account. Thank you very much for joining me, and I hope you have a fun Halloween. And if you wish, you can join me for the Queensland election. I'll be over on Wilmsfront. Thank you very much.